So Nicolas Batum, was waived by Charlotte, which means Charlotte will pay him $9 million a year for the next 3 years to not play basketball, and will essentially be paying, again, I can't even say this with a straight face, Gordon Hayward $147 I can't get it out. $147 million over the next 4 years when you factor in Batum's waived and stretched salary. And specifically, Gordon Hayward will be making $37 million a year for each of the next 3 years. That is, I mean, my goodness. The Knicks did, this is part of the discussion. I was about to say the Knicks didn't take on his salary. The Knicks weren't the only team that could take on his salary. We're going to get there in a second. But the Knicks did not get involved with this. It ended up being a sign and trade with Boston, which gives Boston a very big trade exception. And
largest in NBA history.
Yeah, right. Slightly bigger than the Steven Adams trade exception, which is also relevant to this discussion.
Yeah.
So the Knicks didn't get in on this. They are, as of right now, by virtue of the fact that they have made the Elfrid Payton signing official, and we'll get into the mechanics of how and why this is. They are now down to $18 point something million in cap space, which is still a lot. It's by far the most in the league. I think the Kings have a few bucks because they didn't match bogey, right? Or am I making that up?
No, it's correct, but it's negligible. It's next to nothing.
Yeah, it's next to nothing. So the Knicks still have by far the most cap space in the league. What they will or won't use it on is a matter of discussion. I will turn it to you, as I often do, for general impressions of what did happen, what didn't happen yet. Yeah, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing where you would have liked to have taken on Batum for some sort of asset, of course. And the announcement of the Knicks signing Elfrid Payton kind of gave it away, that it felt like, all right, clearly they're not going to have the space they thought they were going to. And sure enough, a few moments later, it came out that the Hornets would rather
literally like 30 seconds later.
And so it's like, yeah, okay, cool. This is all falling into place. So if you're the Knicks, I mean, first of all, as you said, the Knicks weren't the only game in town here. In fact, I think that you could probably say that the Thunder were in a much better position because they just opened up the Steven Adams trade player exception.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I was looking for this and I couldn't find it. If in an imaginary world they had taken on Batum into that trade exception, that certainly would have put them over the cap for this year.
The Thunder?
Yeah.
They're already over the cap.
So
they're in this weird spot where they haven't spent enough to be over the cap, but because they have enough TPEs and roster holds, or not roster holds, but the cap rights to these players, they're technically over the hold without physically being over it. So it's kind of odd. As someone put it, it's Schrodinger's cap, which is really funny.
Wow, that's spectacular. For the 8 people who got that, it'll be worth it. But it would have put them. Again, correct me if I may be wrong on this. Wouldn't have put them like somewhat close to the tax, or is it not?
They wouldn't have been that close, but I was doing the math earlier because, truth be told, I had this not so much elaborate thing compared to last week, but it was like detailing some specifics. And fortunately, the Hornets were nice enough to waive Batum before I was able to make a fool of myself. So much obliged, Charlotte. Much obliged.
Thanks, Michael Jordan.
And
it's the only time we'll ever say that on this podcast.
Yeah, seriously. So in this case, for the Knicks, I mean, yes, as you said, they're left with the $18 million. I think one thing that complicated all of this is, though the Thunder had that amount as their cap, their TPE, where they could absorb Batum, they're also dealing with a situation with Al Horford, who has not officially become a member of the Thunder. So if the Sixers wanted to say, we want Danny Green now, it would have actually complicated things because for what it's worth, the Thunder cannot aggregate Danny Green's salary with any other players because he was just traded from the Lakers. So you have to wait until early December, which is like December 8th. And that means that training camp, which is already pretty truncated, will have been a week's through, 1 week, and Danny Green wouldn't have been present, and he won't be present. So if the Sixers, say, we want Danny Green in the building right now before training camp, that means that the Thunder, instead of having to do some sort of deal that matches salary-wise, they have to take Al Horford into that TPE that they just acquired for Adams. And then they could figure out a way to send Danny Green as well. So that's, I think, one potential reason why maybe things crumbled. But if they didn't, then again, it's like the Thunder could just take Batum on without the Knicks, or without having to send any salary, which is not what the Knicks were in a position to do. They had to send some sort of salary out. It's just a matter of, are you sending Reggie Bullock when, in my opinion, the asset you could get for Reggie Bullock at the deadline with, say, like a matching salary and a pick is probably a little bit better, if not at worst equal, to Batum and an asset going over to the Knicks. But the bottom line is that the Hornets didn't want to pay any assets to get rid of Nicolas Batum. Or you could look at it as like other teams didn't want Julius Randle, or the Knicks felt that what the Hornets were offering, which in this case, I mean, with the TPE with Boston, they traded, I think, 1 or 2 second-round picks. Like that may not have been worth it to the Knicks to acquire Batum. So,
Boston traded seconds in the 2023 and the 2024 draft, and they got back a conditional second in the 2022 draft, which you could use your imagination. That second's never conveying.
Right. So again, it's like the Hornets are, in this case, they're giving up $9 million or so a year to waive and stretch Batum's contract, and they're really not giving up anything to give Boston the largest TPE in NBA history. Which, I mean, one, I don't really know why they did that, because they didn't have to.
Boston.
I don't know why the Hornets agreed to giving that TPE, because they could have facilitated it another way, but
I
they
guess
decided
they want
to do
the
it.
Picks.
Yeah, I guess.
If you're looking
it's
at
probably it. They wanted 2 second-round picks, but
because if you're Danny Ainge, you're like, so Danny Ainge clearly values this TPE, right?
Which he probably won't use, and then we'll get to hear about how close he was to using it.
I can't wait to
traditional Boston leakage history. It's like, oh, we were so close to getting this great player with our TPE, largest ever, but just didn't work out.
I'm just wondering who the hell does he want to use? Like, I can't even fathom the player, but whatever. We're getting too far afoul of what the point of this conversation is. The Hornets get something for their trouble, right? They get a couple second-round picks. That's something. The more interesting part of this discussion for me is the OKC/New York angle, which basically it's like, okay, because we're like, Mark Berman had a tweet, and I'm going to have Mark Berman on the pod this week, and I'm sure we'll get into it, where he was basically like, James Dolan didn't want to pay $23 million for a pick of some kind. He didn't say explicitly let Dolan put his foot down. He was more like wish-washy on it. And second of all, he didn't say anything about what the pick was. Here's my point. If the Hornets were putting like an unprotected first-round pick on the table either this year or something that would eventually potentially convert to a first-round pick, as opposed to top 14 protected next year, the year after that, and then it converts to 2 seconds, those are very different things. And I would bet you a beer, Jeremy, that if Sam Presti had the opportunity to get a pick from Charlotte that at any point in time in this millennium was going to convert to an unprotected pick, he would have taken that Batum salary into that traded player exception, and he would have ran to the fax machine and faxed that one into the league. So my guess is that whatever pick the Knicks did or did not turn down from Charlotte to take in Batum, it may not be the golden goose that some are making it out to be. I just want to throw that out there. Unless for some reason the Hornets liked, because from the Hornets perspective, what does it matter? Like, you would think that they would rather have Reggie Bullock on, because that would be the money going back, right? Probably it would be Reggie Bullock going back for, like that's something I think the Hornets would want. So it's, again, it doesn't add up for me that it was some, like, the Knicks were turning down like a primo asset here. But maybe I'm missing something. I don't know.
Well, from Charlotte's perspective, they got assets for taking on Gordon Hayward. I mean, and they wanted him in the first place. So it's a win-win in their mind if they're comfortable with stretching Batum, which from even like a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, I guess, they totally were. They were very comfortable with that idea. And then they tried to work it out with other teams, clearly, because that's what the delay was in terms of the, I think, 8 days that it took from us to get to that initial report where Hayward signed to today. So clearly they wanted something out of this, and they're cool with that salary just being wasted away, because they probably figure next year we're not, we'll have some cap relief as is. Zeller's off the books.
Yeah, I was about to say it's Zeller, and I think that's it, right?
That's I believe
that's the big one.
It is, right. But then, Rozier is not a great player by any stretch, but he's on an expiring contract. It's a large one, But maybe if you are from the perspective of Charlotte, you say, what if there's a way where we surround Rozier with better talent?
That's what I'm thinking.
He looks better. And then we can try to trade him for a matching salary, and we can add some of the assets. And we're more comfortable doing that because of the fact that we just netted 2 second-round picks. And again, those second-round picks don't mean a whole lot, but this is also a team.
They're skid greasers.
Right, exactly. They'll make things happen. And the Hornets are also at a deficit in terms of their second-round picks, thanks to partially the New York Knicks. And I think they also don't have their 2023 pick. So
they may not.
From Charlotte's perspective, they might feel like they made out like bandits. I don't quite see it that way, but it's hard to say this was a negative move as long as they're comfortable with Batum being waived.
Yeah.
But from the Knicks perspective, it's just like, okay, well, we tried to get in there and we couldn't. And now we have $18 million.